think it's really important for leaders to be aware of questions that they should be asking themselves when they're making decisions, such as how will this affect group X or group Y? Or if this decision uh, was made and I was impacted, how would I feel about this? So that it just starts you thinking in a very systematic way, answering those questions every single time you make a decision, or, when you make big decisions, thinking really systematically about who else will be affected and what other identities, personalities, nationality, all the rest of it are in the team that are affected by my decisions and by the way that I behave.
Hey everybody, I'm Elizabeth Swan.
And I'm Tracy O'Rourke, and we're from the Just in Time Cafe. Welcome to our podcast. At the cafe, we wrestle with tough questions. We talk to groundbreakers, discuss great books, and get insights from Lean Six Sigma leaders and practitioners who are making a difference in the world.
We let you in on helpful apps, we bring you the news, and we challenge the status quo so you can build your problem-solving muscles.
So, Elizabeth, what is on the cafe menu?
Well, Tracy, on today's episode, we sit down with UK author and empathy firestarter, Shola Kaye, and we're going to unpack, among other things, something she calls empathy hijacking. Yes, that's a thing. And yes, it's probably happened to you. For Book Buzz, we crack open Miracle Mornings and snoop through Tracy's daily habits. Was she ever a night owl? And then for Q&A, we go head to head on how we each structure our own personal growth and whether structure is even the right word. Curious? Good. Let's get into it.
Up next, it's Book Buzz.
Yes. Today's book is Miracle Mornings by Elrod. Today's Tracy is going to lead the discussion because she not only read it, but I suspect she's using some of what she learned. And I've done the next best thing, which is to read all about it, book reviews, Reddit threads, and Mr. Elrod's overview of his own book. And I actually feel pretty ready to discuss it, Tracy. Do you want to start by describing the acronym SAVERS that he uses in the book?
Yeah, let me give you a little background on the book too. So Miracle Mornings incorporates all things that help you get the best start to your day, which is why they call it Miracle Mornings. Essentially, best practices developed over centuries of human consciousness, and they made it a morning ritual. So the acronym is SAVERS, SAVERS. The S stands for silence, which is talking about reducing stress, improving mental clarity by beginning each day with peaceful, purposeful quiet. And that can include things like meditation, breath work, gratitude, prayer, or just contemplation. Then we have A for affirmations. And this is reprogramming your mind to overcome any fears or beliefs that are limiting your potential or causing you to suffer. Because sometimes we ourselves are the reason why we suffer, the way we think, we beat ourselves up and unnecessarily. And what I like about this, sometimes people don't like affirmations because they say, well, are you really lying to yourself? So he talks about this in the book. He says, don't lie to yourself. Reaffirm what you are committed to and why it's important to you. So I thought that was also a nice way to have an affirmation. Then there's V, visualization. So that's experience the power of mentally rehearsing yourself, showing up at your best each day. And I agree. I think this is really good. I do this in pickleball. And I also did this when I was an athlete on a Gaelic football team or any final or semifinal or even at work. Mm. Then there's exercise. We all know about exercise to help your mental and physical energy. And you can do it as little as 60 seconds, literally. Just one quote from the book that I really like. If you don't make time for exercise, you'll need to make time for illness. So, I mean, if you're not motivated, then, do you want to be in pain? Do you want to be ill? And so again, I love this because, and of course, when I read this book, Elizabeth, I thought of you a lot because I know that you do some of these things, and I can't wait to hear what your morning routine is around these things. But you also turned me on to Qigong. And, I do a 10-minute morning routine pretty much every day. And you turned me on to that, and I absolutely love it. And I've told friends about it, and they're doing it too. And so we got two more. R is for reading, acquiring knowledge and expanding your abilities by learning from experts. And the last one is scribing, keeping a journal to deepen gratitude or gain insights or track progress and increase productivity by getting clear on your top priorities. So it's really perfect for busy, successful people. And the book suggests that you do it every morning, the very first thing, 30 minutes of your day that and they say it'll transform your life. And so kind of the breakdown is it's only 30 minutes. So you're doing so the suggestion, again, it's just a suggestion. You don't have to do it. But 10 minutes of silence, 10 minutes for affirmations, 5 minutes for visualization, 10 minutes for exercise, 20 minutes for reading, and 5 minutes for scribing. And like I said, I thought of you because I know you have some of these habits. We've talked about your routine, and I'm not as consistent as you are. And I'm more like most people, a work in progress. So tell us, what did you think?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts about this, and you're right. I do have, when I read it, I was like, oh, good. I do a lot of this. But I'm always curious as to sort of someone's take on this and what's different about it or what have they pulled together. And when I was going through all the little nooks and crannies of reviews, I saw one of the controversies based on my, not incredibly in-depth research was that you had to be an early riser or, what you call a lark instead of a night owl to make these habits really work. And I used to have a really strong bias toward early birds being, not just ideal, but I actually took it to as far as like thinking night owls are lazy. Like, why do they get up so late? Like, what is wrong with them? And I never actually said it, but I thought it. And then I read this article about people simply having different circadian rhythms, right? That's just long documented in a reality. And I have two, I probably have more, but I have two in particular, very successful friends who are both night owls, and I've quizzed them, right? And they can both get up early if the day or the client requires it, but they do their best work later in the day, sometimes late at night. And once I read that, I changed my viewpoint because I realized we are all hardwired to wake up and do our best work at different times. So then I got curious, like, what does the neuroscience say about larks and night owls? And there's a big study that came out last year from the Imperial College of London. They had 26,000 people, and they found out that those who stayed up late scored better on intelligence, reasoning, and memory tests. So they have superior cognitive function, right? And night owls, who are the famous people who are night owls? Just a few of them would be James Joyce, prolific writer, Kanye West, Lady Gaga. These are not people who have not done quite a bit in their life. So I just was curious, Tracy, because I want to get back to the individual bits of this, because I definitely have opinions. But are you naturally an early bird, or did you grow into an early bird? And anyway, how did that impact your openness to the book?
Yeah, I have to say, when I was a young adult, I was a night owl, and I would stay up late. That was my preferred, staying up late and sleeping in. And then I had kids, and you're sort of forced to adapt. So again, I think your question is important because you're saying naturally. So I think, if it was unfettered by other demands, I probably would still be a night owl. But I had kids, and then I was both. I was a night owl and an early riser because I really didn't have a choice, So, I just was basically trying to survive. I don't even really know.
I've heard this. It's just
Right.
survival. The kids are running the show.
Yeah, the kids are running the show.
You're hanging on.
Yeah, so now I'm an empty nester, and what's interesting about that, and I think part of it is our age, how we age and what we prefer. So right now I'm an early riser. I'm in bed by 10:30, and I get up at 5. And I can incorporate a lot of these best practices into my mornings now. And I can focus more on me now than I was able to in the past. And here's another interesting little tidbit. So when I was in high school, we would start as early as 6:30 in the morning. You could take a zero period class
Mm.
and you could take it every day and it was an hour, 6:30 to 7:30, and then you would be done. Now they don't have any classes in our district that start before 8:30 because they know that teenagers need sleep.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting that finally they're recognizing this and they've changed it. And so I think there's this natural rhythm of being an early riser or an owl sometimes with how old we are.
Huh. Yeah, I read that. I know you're right about teenagers. And then I'm
Mhm.
really fascinated because I was like, I know Tracy's an early riser. Was she always one? And how cool or interesting to me that you were not always an early riser. And I wonder what will happen when you don't have to be. But I will say, going back to his SAVERS acronym, you're right. They are part of my routine. Silence. I don't do any email or talking first thing in the morning. I focus. Affirmations, yes, and I purposefully set my intentions. Visualization. This is fascinating because I'm reading about the power of visualization now in a book called The Brain That Changes Itself. And this week, I covered a chapter about the students who visualized playing the piano. And they did a control group, right? One group did a visualization of playing the piano, didn't play it. The other group practiced on the piano, and they made the exact same progress. Like one group isn't even touching the piano, but I know you and I, it's interesting to hear you used it because I know you have been an athlete and so was I, and visualization was big. I think it was even kind of new when I was playing in college. So uh, visualization, I'm more committed to it now because I've just been reading the results of these studies. And then exercise. Yes, you and I both exercise, but your pickleball addiction puts me to shame because Tracy, I can't even touch that. I read voraciously. My reading list is completely impossible for me to keep up, but I think I enjoy some kind of a thrill of just knowing that there's so many great books in store for me. And scribing, I journal every day. I've expanded it over time. I'm always surprised at what surfaces when I take time to write it down, and I just let it rip. It has no structure. So, do you have like I'm thinking already this has changed things for you, so I want to hear about that. And
Mhm.
I'm curious, are there things that you have included because of this book and then things that you want to include? And I know I'm speaking to somebody who has very full days, but I also know what you're capable of. So I suspect you pick and choose what you make room for.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is driven by what is happening in our life too. And I that sounds like a cop out a little bit because I think structure is very, very, very important. But the reality is that, there's sometimes certain days I have to get up very early and be at a client very, very early, and it just doesn't make sense for me to try to get up on that day. So I don't. And so sometimes when I feel like the structure is stressful,
Mm.
I let it go. And I think that's also important. But I've been going through a lot of change in my life, as you know. And, silence has been something I didn't do for at all, really. I just would literally wake up and check my phone. And I really have been purposeful about silence and not doing those things and being reflective and doing some either breath work or reflection. For affirmations and visualization, what's interesting about this is I feel like I do this pretty naturally.
Mm.
I'm most people, so on my strength finders, my number one characteristic is positivity. And I
Mm.
think it's because I have these natural affirmations that I do throughout the day. I'm like, you did a great job, even if I didn't. I don't know, maybe I'm lying to myself, but I tend to be positive and focus on the positive, and I'm very optimistic. And so I do have these affirmations and visualization. They do definitely happen naturally. I don't purposefully do those in the mornings. What I've been very focused on though is exercise and some things that have happened to me. My body is changing. I've noticed that I've got some atrophy in my leg, even though I play pickleball. I've been sore, achy. My mobility isn't very good. And, I also went to the doctor and my blood sugar is up. So I'm having a sort of a wake up call right now related to exercise. And so I'm very, very focused on that part of it. And right now, if I'm strapped for time in a day, I will cut out everything and do the exercise. So, but I've noticed that I tend to read more on the weekends. So, and I really, really, really am loving it because I used to not have any time to read. For years, I only read when I absolutely had to read. So, like, even for our podcast, Elizabeth, there'd be times where I'd be like, I got to get through this book. I couldn't just sit and just read it. And now I can. And so, I'll read more on the weekends and I'll just start reading for 20 minutes and find out that I've been reading for an hour and a half or 2 hours. So I love that. And I would say the biggest challenge I have is journaling. So I am very reflective and I think about it. I just don't like writing down all my thoughts and my reflections. I don't know why. And even when I'm thinking about gratitude, I tend to write them in bullets, not sentences and not paragraphs. And so that's a challenge for me, writing things down that way. It's not my favorite thing.
Fascinating. I've always known you as the supremely positive human being that you are. And to hear you describe and kind of break down your own process, that you actually give yourself positive feedback throughout the day. I hope people are listening to that. Our listener is listening to that, because it's like, that's so huge that you have that built in. That's a superpower. And then the other thing was, lean into the bullets. If bullets work for you, do it in bullets. Who defines journaling for you, Tracy? Nobody.
Right. That's right. Thank you.
So the book is Miracle Mornings. And Tracy, would you say give it a read?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I'd give it a thumbs up. I feel like everybody should read it and make it work for you. What works for you, make it work.
I'm Elizabeth Swan, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast. In a short while, you get to hear our interview with Shola Kaye, our UK guest who has coined the term emotional audacity. We are looking forward to finding out what that means.
Up next, it's Q&A.
Today's question is, how do you structure your own growth habits? It's kind of a timely build on kind of both our discussion with Shola and also the book that you turned me on to. So Tracy, how would you answer this question?
Oh my gosh. So I think what's interesting about this is as consultants, we're supposed to be the experts, right? And we're at clients and we're usually telling them or working with them and collaborating with them on how to do operational excellence better. So we tend to be coming in as experts. And I think that can sometimes be a barrier to people. They think, oh, well, I know this, or they're just honed in on that. Thankfully, though, and I know you feel the same. I love to learn. I really do. And so again, I'm blessed. I feel like I'm blessed because I really do naturally love to learn things. And I feel like I naturally prioritize learning. But I think the challenge is that right now I feel a little overwhelmed about how much I want to learn versus how much time I have to learn. So currently I have a mix of between structure and motivation. So for a while, I was focused on learning one new thing to improve my habits every day, even if it was from a simple change in flagging my emails or learning how to tag someone on Instagram. Or, I tend to do reels and I was like, oh, I learned something new about doing a reel. And, so I tend to have a goal like that, like just learn something quick and new every day. And so I have that I focus on, and I like to hear how people are doing things. And I think it's because we naturally want to be efficient and we naturally want to find better ways to do it. And learning doesn't hurt me. Like I actually feel like sometimes people it's painful for them to learn. They don't like to be in the student mode. So anyway, I'm happy to be that. But I will say that I've been spending a lot of time trying to learn how to build online courses. And there is so much to learn, from editing videos to creating the video, to creating the course, to building the course, to putting in animation and organizing it and creating quizzes. And, it's a new platform. So, I could hire somebody, but I want to learn how to do it. And so it's overwhelming. And my first course was very challenging, and it took a lot longer than I wanted, but it finally got it done. And I feel like now it'll go quicker as I build new courses. And it's easy to get distracted too by peripheral things. Like you start to think about, I should have a YouTube channel. I should be on TikTok. And then you start thinking, well, how am I going to market the course? And I'm like, no, just focus on building the course. Forget everything else until the course is built. So, so it's a kind of a mix between structure and finding time. And also I have to think about what I'm motivated to learn, right? So sometimes I'm just going off motivation, and like I want to learn the answer to something, or so that is a huge one as well. So anyway, I don't know if that answered the question. So it's kind of a mosh pit of habits. There's a little bit of structure, a little bit of motivation, and trying to have some sort of daily goal.
But I think what you described, the thing that stuck out for me the most of what you just described, was that you strive to learn something new every single day. And that is not, don't take that for granted. Like, that's huge. And to your point, people in general, that's uncomfortable. Learning's uncomfortable. We tell people that. That is like a mantra. Learning's uncomfortable. Learning's uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable right now. Things, kind of feel kind of messy. That's normal. And usually we're the teachers. But if we're lifelong learners truly, then we're also constantly learners, which means we should constantly be uncomfortable. So you just described a whole host of things that were making you like, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't do this. But you have taught yourself, and you have the habit of like enjoying that and moving right through it. So that to me is a big window. This is fascinating. We've taken each other's habits for granted for so long. It's interesting just to hear about them, as we pull them apart. So back to that discussion, I think about, like, on his list, there was exercise, right? And exercise has one of the biggest impacts on brain health, right? I used to think it was more about, doing puzzles and mind games. And I'm a huge crossword nut and do them all the time. But the science says exercise has a much larger impact, right? It increases the blood flow to the brain. It promotes things like neurotrophic factors, which I'm not going to be able to explain, but it enhances neuroplasticity, which I do understand, right? Your ability of your brain to grow and change, like where it puts its effort. It can improve your mood, exercise, as you get the endorphins, or your memory. I didn't know that, like that it can improve your memory. And it could, help you protect you against neurodegenerative diseases, right? He said, if you don't make time for exercise, make time to get ill. So generally I don't go a day without, a walk or swim or a bike ride or some combination, and clamming, Tracy, clamming, as you know.
And clamming, for sure, which is super fun exercise.
Big workout, but it's dinner, right? I'm harvesting our dinner. So then, back to another point, education. I read voraciously and I write in my books. And that was a big change for me. I used to, they were like library books or sacrosanct, and I would try to take separate notes. And then I was like, wait a second. I've forgotten who it was. Either it was like Benedict Carey, who wrote How We Learn, or it was Brain Rules by John Medina. But it was like the act of writing makes a much bigger deal in terms of retention and cognition, right? Not highlighting, right? People are like, well, if I just highlight or if I just underline it, nope, it doesn't stick. But if I put little action items next to things that book makes me want to do, if I capture main points and summarize them and write them right there, because then at the end, I gather all of my notes. And that's how I write my review, right? I go back and I say, what are the quotes that stuck out to me? What are the points that stuck out to me? What really resonated? And then I write that review, and then I keep solidifying, what did I take from that book and what do I do differently, right? Because my attitude is it should have taught me something that should make me do something different. Right now, I use all nonfiction. I've loved fiction. I know I'll dive into fiction again, but I'm particularly interested in the way our brains are set up, and how to take advantage of our own neuroscience. Scribing or journaling, and we've talked about this. That's part of my routine. So, I set expectations or my intentions for the day. Then I jot down what did I do, and then what are my reflections on that. And then the day after, I've sort of thought about it, how'd the day go, and then I journal, like how'd that go? What did I learn? What did I not learn? I usually throw paradox in there. What are the things I'm excited about? And then not, like, what's the thing that is both, what's conflicting in me? Because I think paradox is a platform for innovation, right? When you feel both those things, this is great, but also, meh, like you're saying, like it's exciting, you want to learn every day, but it's also, oh my God, YouTube and this, like when does it end? Like this is a lot. So it can be overwhelming, but also exciting. So all those things. But when I do that journaling, and the last thing I do is, is say, well, what would you do different? Right? All this, you meant to do this, this happened, this is what you thought about it. What would you do differently? So it might be a tiny thing, but that to me is continuous improvement, right? That is, all right, I did all that. All right. So then I'm constantly adjusting. So, and I think you've shown, what I admire about you is you don't hesitate to dive into the unknown. You don't just read, you immediately experiment with what you just read. And I've known that about you since we met. I think you read, Pete Pandy's The Six Sigma Way, and you're like, okay, I can run improvement projects. Let me just follow this book, like way, way back in your career. So yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. No, I would agree. I'd say one of my favorite apps, I mean, like that, to me, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? You read something and then how do you immediately apply it or immediately experiment with it, so that you can absorb the learning from a practical application perspective. And I think I still say that one of my absolute favorite books that I've done this with is moving from theory to practice was the book Switch by the Heath brothers. I was so captivated about the change management concepts they discuss in that book. I started applying it right away. I had clients and I started looking at the different change efforts they were doing and recognizing which approaches they were using in the book and which ones they weren't using and how can we use those. So let's brainstorm right now how we could apply this concept to this process change, or at least the people that have to change. And I was so enthralled with it that I literally developed a full day class to apply these concepts in OPEX and continuous improvement specifically that I love teaching because it's so applicable just in process improvement alone. So still love that. And I agree with you. I feel like I get super excited about stuff like that. And I didn't do a whole class on miracle mornings, but I'm pretty excited about applying these concepts.
It's
How about
okay.
you?
You got other classes to work on, Tracy. We don't need to do that one, but so the book I'm reading right now, and my habit is if I get up crazy early, I bomb up to my little reading nook and I read the latest book is The Brain That Changes Itself. It is 18 years old. It is about the developing understanding of the neuroplasticity of our brains. Like it wasn't just, this part of your brain does this and this part of your brain does this. Like it's all very, very changeable. And it's challenging me because one of the biggest messages is that challenging ourselves, right? Learning grows our brain, right? So what you have as a habit, Tracy, is constantly adding new neurons. And we can do that, as far as I've read, until we die, right? I mean, it's into your 90s. I watched my mother do it. My mother was still painting. She was still reading. She was still at it at 91. And we talk about that, right? Where it's learning is uncomfortable and all that. But I think it's during that discomfort, we're adding brain cells. And they cited things like, learning a new language or a musical instrument or how to harness AI, which, a lot of us are struggling with, making a career shift, or challenging yourself to shift long ingrained habits, right? That is another thing that we have to sort of wrestle with. Anyway, Tracy, we're going to be so smart. It's crazy.
I'm Tracy O'Rourke, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast. We host these monthly, so you can go to www.jitcafe.com and go to our podcast page.
Coming up next, it's our interview with our featured guest, Shola Kaye. Tracy, how about you tell our listeners a little bit about Shola?
I would love to. First of all, that is one awesome name. Like, I feel like she should be like a superstar or a movie star or something. I don't know, or boxer. I don't know. Shola Kaye is the author of 2 books and an award-winning international speaker on communication, inclusive leadership, and empathy at work. She's passionate about helping organizations create an atmosphere of belonging for their people. When a workplace is fully inclusive and welcoming, as you guys can all imagine, amazing things happen. People are transformed into leaders, teams and groups perform better, everyone gains. And Shola's work has appeared in a variety of industry journals. She's a LinkedIn learning instructor, and her clients include the United Nations and Deloitte. And we are so happy to have her all the way from the UK at the cafe.
Here, here.
Welcome, Shola.
Yes, welcome to the cafe. I am so psyched we got you here, Shola.
Hi, it's Tracy. Great to be with you.
Thank you. And now we're just going to pepper you with questions, Shola. So just sit back and relax because it's all coming at you. So one thing I want to acknowledge is that you do speak internationally, and you have done for quite some time. And I wanted to just get a sense from you of what do you see as reactions to your messages about the need for inclusive leadership? How do people react to that?
It's interesting because some people say that inclusive leadership is hogwash because all leaders should be inclusive anyway. So just the fact that we say inclusive is completely unnecessary. And then others dig in on the fact that behind inclusive leadership, that word inclusive means that there are a lot of behaviors that many leaders don't practice, right? So we kind of need that as a moniker, if you like, or as a label, just to remind us what best practice is in leadership. And that's across the board. So I've heard people in different organizations, different countries say, yeah, we need the term inclusive or we don't. But I think now there's more of a move towards talking about culture as opposed to inclusion, for some obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm. So why is inclusive leadership hard? Why is it so hard? And what does it look like in action?
Well, I think it's hard because a lot of leaders forget that not everyone is like them, or that they feel that their ideal leader that they're trying to kind of leadership qualities they're trying to bring out in their teams are kind of mini me. Yeah, you should just follow what I do and everything will be great. And then, of course, we forget that there are some individuals who either don't have access to the same background or skills as the leader that they have, or they just have a very different personality, different background. So I think it's really important for leaders to be aware of questions that they should be asking themselves when they're making decisions, such as how will this affect group X or group Y? Or if this decision was made and I was impacted, how would I feel about this? So that it just starts you thinking in a very systematic way, answering those questions every single time you make a decision, or, when you make big decisions, thinking really systematically about who else will be affected and what other identities, personalities, nationality, all the rest of it are in the team that are affected by my decisions and by the way that I behave.
This is great, Shola. You just reminded me of something that I discovered that I wasn't aware of. And I teach a lot of folks in the hospital, a teaching hospital system. I teach them problem solving. And I noticed that at the point where we were doing a final exam, there were people who took 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes to answer 25 questions, and there were folks that were on for the full hour. And then I started recognizing these are people every time where English was not their first language. And I started looking at the questions. I had them, like I'd have one at the end and they would be still on. So I just out of curiosity, I was like, tell me where you're stumbling. And they would read, I said, read the question for me. And then say, what do you think that's asking? And I recognized my assumptions around how I phrased questions. And I thought, I need to be a lot more clear. Like I've been a little bit I don't know what the word is, but it sort of simplistic in thinking, oh, everyone knows X or everyone knows Y, or just not thinking through what is an airtight way to ask this so that nobody could make a mistake in any way. So that was sort of like I realized, wow, I need to redo my exams. So that was interesting. I want to come back to something also that is was new to Tracy and I. We both gravitated toward it, and that is your term of emotional audacity, right? That's just such a great term, and it sounds so powerful. And switching into the world of problem solving, like how do you see empathy and bold action helping continuous improvement leaders navigate, the resistance to change, right? Because problem solvers, they're fixing something, which means they're changing it, right? And people resist change.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I talk to quite a few groups about, change and empathy, and many of us know that just the simple act of listening and being empathetic can really help people move through, the change curve where people go through uncertainty, denial, all those different emotions, right? And sometimes we can't do anything about people going through those emotions. They have to go through them, but we can speed them through that curve or help them through certain areas which are problematic to them by displaying empathy and by just showing that we understand what they're going through. But I think on top of that, there's an element, and this is where I talk about emotional audacity, and it's not just the bravery to say, right, ta-da, this is what I think, or boom, these are my views, right? There's also an element of being brave enough to listen to what people are experiencing, because the act of listening can really be therapeutic for others. It can help people, move through, as I said, these emotions that they will inevitably experience. So sometimes audacity for certain individuals is the bravery to truly be with people who might be, we might say, oh, they're bitching and moaning or they're carping or whatever, right? But to be with people as they are going through that and to truly listen, because the more senior you are, or not even to do with seniority, but leaders often have the option of not having to listen to this stuff, right? They can say, boom, this is it, sweeping change, I'm off now, you deal with it, right? But it's so much more helpful for people and also useful for the leader to learn, right? If they can stick around and listen. And so that audacity, for some, it will be, how do I speak up more boldly and bravely? Others, it will be, how can I regulate my emotions so that I can stay with somebody while they are dissing what I've said to them or criticizing my idea or telling me that they're really upset about the change about to happen to them. How can I stay with them through that without kind of my typical knee-jerk reactions just kicking in and me, just having some sort of response that isn't particularly valuable for the other person in this time?
Oh,
I think
go ahead,
sometimes
Tracy.
the challenge too is people just don't know what to say sometimes when emotions are involved. And there's a lot of emotions at work right now. And I feel like people just don't know what to say and they kind of freeze because they don't want to say the wrong thing. They want to show empathy, but they're not very good at it. So sometimes I think leaders jump past it as fast as possible because they don't want to offend people. So what do you have any tips around improving communication when people are really unsure? They want to acknowledge and address it, but they're unsure about how to go about doing that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it is a problem that many people have. And I was working with a senior leadership team in the States a while back, and they wanted to have these listening tools with their teams, but they were really worried that because they're so used to being directed, right? So, oh my gosh, I've got to sit quietly and listen and then respond. What do I do? So we actually had a session on, how do you respond to people saying things? And sometimes it's acknowledging that and saying, you know what, I'm really grateful to you that you're sharing this with me, or even, you know what, I don't even know what the right words to say are right now, but I'm really feeling what you're experiencing, or I'm trying to put myself in your position. Can you explain that even more to me? Or what is that making you feel? Or just asking questions to get the person to share a little bit more deeply. How does that feel for you? What are you planning to do next? Even things like that. You're not trying to shut the person down. You're allowing them to continue on. You're not necessarily saying, oh, yes, I've been through that before, because that can come across as very patronizing. And you are not that same person. So you haven't been through exactly what they've been through. And then what you do get is sometimes people doing what we call sort of empathy hijack, which is where they say, oh yeah, I've experienced that too. Let me tell you about mine. Okay, and then they just take it away. So I say to people who are in that situation, I say to them, you might want to acknowledge that you've experienced it too and say, oh yeah, I went through something similar, but you carry on now. And I'll tell you about mine later. So you get that out of your system briefly, and then you say, right, back to you. This is your floor to speak. So all those, I mean, it really depends on the scenario and the person and so on. But anything like that where you say, gosh, that's really tough for you, tell me a bit more, typically encourages that person to go deeper and share more. And we haven't all experienced what everyone else has experienced. So sometimes we have to say, you know what, I'm here for you to listen. I don't quite know the right thing to say. I don't want to appear clumsy, but I just totally want to hear you and support you. What do you need from me?
Yeah.
What can I say to help you?
It reminds me of a personal experience. So my mother died when I was 32, and everyone around me had their moms still. And when they knew that my mother had passed, I could tell they were very uncomfortable. So I felt bad for them because I knew they felt uncomfortable or awkward and they didn't know what to say. And sometimes they said terrible things. But I didn't look at it like that. I just felt like, okay, they tried to communicate and I have to appreciate that. And so I really feel that empathy for when people are trying to show empathy and maybe they don't do it so well. But I think what's important about what you said too is that asking of questions, because sometimes people open the door a crack just to see what happens. And then if people just brush it off, they think, okay, well, nobody was interested. So I was with friends at an event, and one of the women there said, "Oh, I'm kind of going through something personally." And then she said, "But I don't want to bore you guys, you know." And she started talking about something else. And I came back to her and I said, "Well, what is it? Is it something you want to talk about?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm waiting to see if I have cancer." So it was sort of like, and then we kind of spent a moment talking about her fears, and luckily she didn't, but she had a high percentage of it. So sometimes you're right, that door, they open the door to let you know, but it's almost like if you don't catch it, you miss the opportunity to find a connection and show empathy and support them.
Yeah,
This
that's such an amazing point. Sorry, Liz, you go on. Yeah.
No, you brought things up for both of us, but it reminded me of early on in my career, I recognized how important it was when someone said something, if I was running a workshop, to just put it on the flip chart. And when people were asking, how do I deal with all this input and people were saying, I said, write down what they're saying. Write it down. If people see that you've written it, they're going to register you're listening. All right. And then what you're saying is, okay, now take that to this other level that, and that's about around emotion, which I feel like we've done such a great job sanitizing from the workplace for, forever. And now it's a labor to say, you know what? Ignore it or not, they're there and they are in action. So if you don't ask, you are, just, repressing and ignoring something that is operating, and not in a good way if you don't acknowledge it. So that point to and what Tracy reiterated, of opening that door, like naming it, letting people name it, letting people say it, doesn't mean you have an answer right away, but just letting that be named. And the other thing I just really liked, which I'm gonna hold on to, is the empathy hijack. That is
I know, I love that.
so real. And I think, we've all had it happen where you're like, yeah, but okay, over to you. And it's like, that it's training to not, oh yeah, like that happened to me. Okay, now me. And so it's like your job is to go, like you said, I hear that. I have something similar, but let's go deeper. Tell me more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the irony, it's often the people that think themselves very empathetic that are the ones that do the most hijacking, because they think, well, it's the same topic. Doesn't matter if it's me or them speaking. Oh, it's my turn now, right? So yeah, it's so important.
But it's also like our brains. I think there's it's some release of dopamine when you talk about yourself. So it is what our inclination, like that's enjoyable if I can tell you about me. So it is a training, it is a practice, it is a habit you have to form to go, yeah, that's fun. And there's a big intrinsic reward there, but we got a higher purpose to attend to.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would also say that I'm sure that there are some leaders listening to this podcast that still believe emotion doesn't belong in the workplace, right? So, and so I think people are recognizing more and more that you have to bring your whole self to work, but again, some people just aren't comfortable. And I really see this as tying into the pillar of respect for people, which is a huge pillar for our world process improvement. And so, is there anything else? Can you just speak to that a little bit about why empathy is respect for people?
Mm. Well, everyone's different, right? We all go through different emotions. We all have had different backgrounds. And there's a quote actually from Michelle Obama, and I'm rubbish at remembering quotes, but it was something like, empathy is recognizing that other people's experiences have value too. And quite often we either just brush over other people's experiences, or we say, well, I haven't had that same background. I'm not going to worry about where they're coming from or what their input is here or whatever it might be. But if we are wanting to respect people and all the difference that we bring to the table, because as we know, that diversity is really is strategic, right? It's really going to help bring organizations forward. So even if it's just from that perspective, but yeah, we have to have respect for where people are coming from. And there are all sorts of behaviors, covering and code switching, where people feel that they have to behave a certain way or dress a certain way or do things a certain way to be accepted, to get opportunities to move ahead and so on. And that it means that those individuals aren't able to bring, their best selves to work. So what does that mean in terms of what else they're jettisoning when they walk through the door of the office or they click onto their computer every day? Could be, the ideas, the creativity, whatever it might be, their essence as a human being is being tamped down, right? So even if you're just thinking in terms of people's performance and not as the whole person, what does that mean if somebody is having to suppress a good proportion of themselves before they can actually interact with your team? So just thinking of it that way can help raise the idea of respect for everybody, so they can be who they are and a sense of belonging can evolve
and perform better because of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you've worked globally, companies like Google, GSK, Deloitte. You've mentioned American workshops. You obviously are based in the UK. Have you seen regional or cultural differences in how organizations embrace emotional intelligence or communication training?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when I talk about psychological safety, for example, there's a framework that I like to share from a coach called Michael Bungay-Stanier, and he calls it the Terra framework, TERA, and he says that to create psychological safety, you need four elements. T stands for team, so people to feel that there's a team environment and that everyone's looking out for them. E stands for expectation, people needing to feel that there are positive expectations of them. People want them to succeed. They don't want to trip them up and kind of have them fail. R stands for respect or rank. So, for example, in some cultures, it's very important to be respectful of others in the way that you talk to them, the way you look at them, and so on. And then A stands for autonomy. And, obvious people feeling that they've got a sense of control over how they carry out their work and so on. And it was interesting because I was doing a workshop for Google, and we looked at sort of Asia Pacific earlier in the day, and then we did the same workshop again for Europe and the USA and North Africa and Middle East. And then what happened was I did a poll on, okay, which aspects of this Terra framework are most important to you? And there were clear differences between APAC and the other region. And we found that with APAC, there was much more emphasis on team. I need a sense that the team respect as well. Whereas then when we went to sort of the West, we were seeing more around autonomy was important for people, team as well. But, that's just like a very kind of roughly hewn example of how just in the same day with different populations, you could see things differently. So, I mean, there definitely are cultural aspects involved. For example, even little things like I was talking to a woman who was from Kenya, but she's working now in the USA for a USA corporation. And in Kenya, when you look at your manager, or you don't look at your manager because it's seen as respectful to not meet them in the eye.
Mm.
Whereas when she got to the States, she was doing the same thing, being quite sort of deferential towards the manager, not looking in the person's face. And then this guy said, "You seem so shifty and dishonest. Why don't you look me in the eye?" And she screamed out, "Hold on, I'm being respectful to you." So even these little things can make a difference in terms of we just have to increase our cultural awareness so that we can be a manager of everyone in the team, not just those like us.
That is such a great example. And we've all experienced it, even on tiny differences. Like culture could be a company culture. I remember two consulting teams getting together because they combined forces to win a bid for a big project we did together with the hospitality industry. And the culture with one firm was as soon as you understood what someone was saying, you said, "Got it." Right? And that was their understood way of like, okay, I got what you're saying. And that was respectful to let people know I'm listening and I got what you're saying. And for the team I was with, it felt like they kept cutting us off and saying, got it, like shut up. We perceived it as being told to stop talking. So we had to, we went for drinks in the evening and this all came out. But I was thinking, that's the US. Like, that's just two different firms. So yeah, no, that's fascinating. And your polling unearthed it. I love it. That's great.
Well, our cup of Joe with Shola is almost over. So I guess I will ask you, Shola, what didn't we ask you that you would maybe like to share with our audience, if anything?
Gosh, what an interesting question. You know what? No, I think you asked about empathy, you asked about inclusive leadership, you asked about emotional intelligence and emotional audacity. So you guys were pretty thorough. You did your homework. Well done.
We're good at that. We pride ourselves, Shola. So I'm just going to say, anybody wants to connect with Shola, we're going to put links in on our website for this episode, but also just so you know, her name is on LinkedIn, because I loved you're very active and you put really useful posts out on LinkedIn, which I enjoy following and I learned from. Her Shola's name is Shola Kaye, Shola Kaye. So, and is there any other link you want us to put in there, Shola?
Oh, no, LinkedIn is great. On my website, it's the same thing, sholakay.com. So, yeah, feel free to reach out. If you have any questions about anything we've discussed today, feel free to reach out and connect. I love hearing from people.
Okay, I have one last question. Are you coming to the States anytime soon?
You know what? I don't have any trips planned, but you know what? If anyone wants to invite me out, I'd be very happy to come along.
She does like San
Wonderful.
Diego, Tracy. She does like
I
San Diego.
do. I love San Diego. I was in the States about 4 or 5 times last year, so it's time for some trips this year too.
Wonderful. Thank you,
Well,
Shola.
thank you, Shola. Very fun to have a little bit of the UK coming into the cafe. So
Wonderful. Thank you
we'll
both.
get you back here too. Take care.
Take care.
Please. Bye.
If you haven't heard yet, the second edition to our book is on the streets. Buy one for yourself or for somebody else. Or do you need a few raffle prizes for an upcoming event? Because some people already asked me about that. Do you have someone in mind that you want to see develop into a better problem solver? Did you discover some money in the budget and you need to spend it before the end of the fiscal year? Why not get some books? Our book solves all of these problems. So get your paperback and or your ebook on Amazon.com. You won't regret it because we will help you have happy problem solving.
Yes. And here's some updates on an opportunity to meet up with Tracy live. She's going to be in Arlington, Texas in October for the Lean Construction Institute's Congress Conference. She's doing a pre-conference workshop on embracing the leader role in creating ideal conditions and coaching problem solvers. Tracy, tell us, or tell our audience, tell me and everyone else listening a little bit about the workshop.
Yes, so it's on Tuesday, October 21st. It is focused on leaders who are trying to be better leaders, right? And how? By embracing the role of how you create ideal conditions so that people can thrive in problem solving. And also, what can you do to coach problem solvers better? These are typically two very important habits that leaders really should be owning. And so ultimately, we're going to talk about some of the lean leadership principles. We're going to talk about strategies for fostering some problem solving culture and reflecting on current conditions culturally and what you can do to create better conditions. And the goal is ideal conditions. So ultimately, we talk about some of the challenges that you have, the changing mindsets in lean leadership, and really the two main responsibilities of a lean leader, which is creating ideal conditions and growing those problem solvers. And then lastly, leader routines. So we just talked about our morning routines, and this is really about what kind of routines do leaders typically have when they are trying to strengthen a problem-solving culture. They exist. Do you know what they are? And are you doing them? Well, if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you need to come to my workshop. And speaking of workshops, Elizabeth, you have 2 workshops coming up too. Fall is almost here. And in October, first at the Northeastern Lean Summit in Connecticut, and then at AME in St. Louis, Elizabeth's going to be conducting the Praise Paradox workshop. So Elizabeth, tell everyone a little bit about those.
So we all crave recognition, but we hesitate to give it. So the paradox is that while authentic praise energizes and motivates us, we don't always see ourselves as the source of it. So then you have this cycle of unrecognized efforts, which is not good. And employees who feel unseen are 3 times more likely to quit, while those who feel valued are more engaged, more productive, more committed. So this workshop is an interactive session that drives that dives into the science, the neuroscience, where my brain is, of praise and its profound impact on performance, retention, and just overall workplace culture. So I'll bring people through activities and work on actionable strategies that drive motivation and innovation and strengthen working relationships. It's going to be awesome.
So the dates are October 1st in Connecticut for the workshop at the Northeastern Lean Summit, and October 6th in St. Louis for the AME conference. So when are we going to have time to get ready for Halloween if we're going to all these conferences in October?
Ridiculous.
I don't know what's going on with that. So lastly, I do have one last announcement, and that is I have an in-person Lean Six Sigma Green Belt course that I'm teaching at UC San Diego. It's open to the public. Anyone can join in person. The dates are on Thursdays in San Diego starting September 25th, and we meet every Thursday until October 30th. So September 25th, October 2nd, October 9th, we skip the 16th, and then we meet on the 23rd and on the 30th. And those dates are in-person training, and then we have the presentation day is in December, because all the green belts that I teach require a green belt project, because we just talked about how important application is to learning. And you are going to do a project in the class. And the cool thing about that is you're getting trained and you're getting results at the same time. Who wouldn't want that? So we'll include the links so you can look at more detail and get registered. And
okay, that was the last from Tracy, but I have another last thing. So because even though you've already heard about a number of things, I'm also hosting a free remote interactive session for the Northeast Regional AME virtual speaker series, and that one's called the Praise Puzzle. So it's paradox adjacent, and that's happening on August 7th. So very soon, and we'll delve into our own personal habits around praise, recognition, acknowledgement, and we'll get some praise stats, and that'll then feed into the workshops. But it'll be breakouts and polling, and it'll be really fun. It'll be great to learn from each other. So stay tuned for all the what, Tracy?
I was just going to say, it's never a dull moment around here, man. We are not bored.
Not bored, and always learning, apparently.
Always learning.
Stay tuned for all the news by joining our community at the Just in Time Cafe. Thanks for joining me and Tracy for another fabulous episode. You are our favorite thing about the Just in Time Cafe, and we look forward to being your lifelong learning partners.
Yes, join us next month and every month for your jolt of lean caffeine with Elizabeth and Tracy.